So there are people with microphones. So anybody want to ask a question? I know people around here are not shy, so please.
I was struck by something you said, Ambassador, about in the civil rights movement there was no by the way.
There was no what?
There was no by the way. Everything was strategic and it was very meticulously planned. And I'm kind of curious, there is sort of in some people this bent toward talking about really important events like that, like they just happened. And I am curious, not just in the civil rights movement, but in any movement where there's a strategy and there's a plan to try to make the world better, when we try to frame those situations as a by the way, it just happened to happen, do you think that's an honest misunderstanding? Or is there maybe some element of relinquishing responsibility? Because
both. I think that the generation that let go in the 70s, because number one, we were fatigued, and you really did have an idealistic presumption that things were going to go as the fights, the struggles, the bills, civil rights bills, you thought they were going to be answered. And so people kind of let go. And also people did not want their children, the next generation, at risk. And so at some place there was a kind of passive response to the rest, but really based on the belief in the faith that we had arrived at a place where that we would be responsible with affirmative action, which we don't have anymore. I mean, and so on and so on. And the other was, you said what?
Well, I was curious if maybe when we look at situations as if they happen to happen that way, somebody who is from the outside looking in is looking at it as it's going to take care of itself. I don't necessarily need to be concerned with this person's struggle because look at what happened when Rosa Parks just decided she didn't feel like moving to the back of the bus. If we look at it as it's a spontaneous thing and things got better, is that maybe something that people in a position of power use to avoid the discomfort of, I need to question how I see this situation?
I think the bishop stated it one way. He gave us a remark, and whoever excerpted it and reported it revealed the edit. But then we believe the edit. We don't do the work ourselves to find out other answers and comparative experiences and to really know the way the book report was that you showed the parallels in least likely lineages of people actually cross all the time. And I feel that it is our due diligence, it is our responsibility to do the extra work. Such as when I said that it was intentional, strategic, and based on an outcome, not just to be seen and heard. Otherwise, people would have been disruptive. But if the outcome is to make sure that however many people show up in the mall, Lincoln Memorial, on that day, and with the hopes, even if you don't trust it, the hopes, idealistic hope, that somebody would live up to the word or the principle or the intention of the Civil Rights Bill, which we're still fighting to assure 50 years later. So we've had the celebration of the March on Washington, but we haven't checked all of the line items that have been promised. That's our job, to make sure that that's in place. And I think that we've been relaxed on that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think I have a microphone while that one's being delivered. I'm Christie, and thank you all so much for your extraordinary pearls. I'd like to follow up on what I think is being suggested, which is that we need the moral leadership. We're all thrilled, regardless of where we come from on a faith, it seems to me, with Pope Francis, at least seemingly where he's leading us. But we need more than the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. We need every major faith to have a major voice and have the commonality of words. And so I'd love you all to talk about that. I mean, I think that, you know, one of the words that has been trivialized, maybe, but maybe not too much so, is the word love. And don't we all have that in common? But let's find the words that we have in common, and then let's use them to inspire the movement that we are all capable of being a part of. There are billions of us. We're ready to march. We're ready to do whatever. But we need that moral leadership. So I would hope that you all would figure out and then ask us to help you figure out how to get the rest, all the important leaders from every faith group, and go to the Vatican, I don't care where they go together, and still come out until they've found the common language that will then just put us all on fire. So, thank you.
Great. So my question, so I wanted to ask which of the panelists has figured it out, and if they can please answer. Anybody want to answer, Christie?
The panelists have figured it out to the degree that they've listened carefully to Christie Brown. I know.
Anybody else? Or
I think the cry of young people is really the script that we have to listen to. I mean, young people today, when I talk about being a multiple, young people don't care which denomination answers it. They're ready to enter any holy house, any home of worship, if you're going to make sure that what's happening with law enforcement and their communities, and what's happening to women and girls and their families, and what's young people, and it's always been movements of young people who, because they really do have the idealism intact, they have the faith intact. What becomes our role to assure it, to echo what you said? And I think that that's a think tank, and I don't think that anyone going into it denominationally has to have the last voice so that their religion is getting the credit for it. We have to remove all of that from God's work, from faith work, from the service work, from the mission work, and find some ecumenical cross-respect that allows me to hear it howsoever, and to be able to quote the right persons through that particular denomination or scripture, so that you find the union. When I'm sitting at a Seder dinner, now I'm the Egyptian at the table, remember? In many ways. But based on the Seder dinner I actually go to, they're kind of revolutionaries. They're old and they were foot soldiers. So they write it so that it's inclusive of women, and it's inclusive of all the people that are left out, so that they can, and they use the parallels of scriptures of all of the predominant religions that echo peace and union. And so at the dinner, while we're piecing and eating and engaging and passing, no matter how different you felt when you walked in, you know that you've been given permission to function as one. The thing becomes, when we leave that dinner, what's the work? Which is your question. What's the work? That we just have a fun time, a good time, a restorative time. But what is now our mission? And I know for me, I was raised in mission work. And so it's how I choose it all the time. The thing becomes, where's the posse? Where's the collaboratives? Because you can't do it alone. The risks and the need for fortification and affirmation to start again every day to do the big work is all the time. So you're not just having an annual festival, but how does the work of the festival move on and inspire for 365 more days? That's always.
It's a sacrament at
yeah,
that point.
Yeah, and to be able to do it, I think there are more and more interfaith discussions that are happening anyway, and so that people can feel like they can walk into a room and they're not forsaking God as they know Him. And because that's a big thing, you know, if I invite people to a Ramadan dinner, they've said, well, you know, I'm Christian. I said, no, it's just food. We're just breaking bread. But to be able to, I know enough about their religion to be able to find the parallels so they understand what the gift of Ramadan is. So that's kind of the work. I think what happens Monday after, so that people are really in touch. And that when the Festival of Faith team, I mean, I knew months ago that there was a real intention based on headlines, the misuse of force in communities, and every 2 weeks there's like more. We keep believing it's over. Right. And then we go back to where we were, and it happens again. And you want to say, God, that's really on us. How do we change that? How are people safe in the world? And how do the young people who are crying out, hoping we have answers, getting those answers? How do we make sure that idealism has validity?
Exactly.
Could I
Sure.
add on to
Absolutely.
that fantastic answer? I was inspired, and I'm answering Christie to some extent, her question and her charge. I was inspired by the accounts more recently than Rosa Parks, right, of the origin of the Arab Spring, to learn that Tunisia, which started it, got started after 2 years of strategic planning. And I did hear an eminent scholar say, as it started, this spontaneous movement, but it was 2 years of strategic struggle. So the strategy is incredibly important, and we can do that work. That's hopeful. We actually have learned the lessons of the many civil rights movements, and we can evolve them. They're not exactly the same. We can evolve them. And then with that, and this one is where I will be in tension. I think we're not done with the fruits of what Occupy was doing. And by that I mean, and many people disagree with me on this, but the deliberate lack of an identified leader, was one of the reasons people say it failed. Well, okay, it failed at the moment, but all these movements, we learn from what happened. And it's not necessarily, the lesson is not necessarily go back to what existed before it, but rather, how do we move that forward in a way that brings many, many voices into leadership together? So I don't have the answer to that, but I'm actually quite interested in it.
And not combative leadership. I mean, people generally
collaborative
think,
leadership.
yeah, collaborative. They think they have to choose one side
Right.
or the other. And
I mean, your Seder is so beautiful, and I hope that they pray for the Egyptians too.
well, yeah, I'm there. I'm
Right.
there every year.
But you know what I mean? It's like, it's
Yeah.
not just that they drowned in the sea.
Well, yes, right. It's a brilliant Seder. It's one of the Seders I wish they actually did a lesson plan with every year.
That would be amazing.
They're nearly 90 years old, so they've been long at it. They're answering that question from the civil service, civil rights, and human rights and faith regions. And there's a collective of children of theirs that are around that table every year and need to be there. We need to be there, the yearning to be there. But in their aged selves are hoping we go out and do the work, just as Mrs. Brown just said. What's next? So that it's not a warm and fuzzy.
Dr. Pramuk, I know there are other questions, but we haven't heard from you in a little while. What about Sofia? I mean, I'm just asking, what would Holy Wisdom say to these questions?
Do you have an hour, another hour? No, well, I think if I were to think through Merton's imagination just for a moment, I think image of God matters. He would go down to the deep theological
Wow.
and question the predominant image of God, that out of which we operate, the stories, the images, the narratives by which we structure our lives. And why is Sofia, why is Holy Wisdom a revolutionary image? Because it presses against, or it expands our presumed notions of God, of the divine.
Yeah.
You know, so I do think, you know, and biblically she cries out from the crossroads, inviting us to, you know, to dare to imagine a different future. You
Wow.
know, that's her message. I guess just a last add-on to what I've heard you both beautifully say, and I was so moved by your talking about the house you grew up in, being a house of multiple identities. So how do we get our young people to cross identity lines? You know, as a teacher, I'm very hopeful on the one hand because I see it happen in the classroom, and I would affirm, you know, young people don't care so much about these. On the other hand, And so they're interdating across religious lines, et cetera. You know, but on the other hand, those old lines are still deeply entrenched. They self-segregate quite a lot. And even more than in Merton's day, 50 years ago, I mean, he was concerned 50 years ago about the role of communications, media, technology. They would say this too, that their lives are so much patterned by the new technologies, which I fear tend to divide more. Everything is spin,
Yep.
you know? And so everything in the media world, it's not about doing the work of encounter. It's about, you know, what's the spin, what's the narrative? And so on the one hand, I'm very hopeful about kind of the new generation and their presumptions. On the other hand, you know, in so many ways, I think there are many good things to say about the technology, but on the other hand, in many ways, it insulates them from real encounter, you know, across these various social lines. So, you know, and as a parent, as a father, I have an interracial family. We've adopted 2 children across from Haiti. So we have 4 children, and I'm, you know, so I was, you know, listening to you very closely about identity and how my kids, how can I strengthen their identity both as Haitians, but also as, you know, as children of our family, et cetera. You know, so I think my hope comes from not necessarily what's going on in the public square. So back to your question, that's important. How do we occupy the public square with the religious message of hopefulness? But also, we shouldn't overlook the small stuff, the family life, the way that we shape our children's imaginations, just day in, day out, the stories we read to them, you know, and the traditions we share with them, you know, from many different places. That's what I'll take away, especially from your comments.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's grab one more question in the middle there, and then we have to wrap up. Yeah.
Hello. I loved your term multiple. I'm also a multiple, and I come out of a disaster. My father met my mom at the end of World War II in France. I was born and raised here in Louisville. My question to you is, in our society in America, I understand that there are less and less people who are joining communities of faith. In Europe, I've recently heard that 90% of all the French people, I'm not including the Muslims, which are of course on the rise, but only 10% or even less attend church, and only for baptisms, weddings, funerals, communions, etc. So my question to you is, who will do this work? Who do you see in your mind's eye as the people who will tilt things? When I talk to people in France about this, they all agree with me. Most of us in this room are in agreement of everything you've said. It makes absolute sense to me, and it makes sense to a lot of people. But who is going to tip it? Is it going to be in the socioeconomic realm? Is it going to be in the age realm, the millennials, et cetera, the baby boomers? Or is it going to be in the seat of the people, fewer and fewer, who are in faith groups? And I'm sorry, it's kind of a complicated question.
Oh, it's an amazing question.
Yeah. Anybody want to take that?
I think that starts with you.
Oh. Yeah, I'll be brief.
Of the cloth.
Okay. Yeah, but I'll be brief because I want to hear both of them. But were you at were you here last night for the music?
It was absolutely what you said. I forgot AM, FM.
Yeah, it was, right? So thank you. That I don't need to say a lot more. That beautiful movie about your city, Music That Makes a City. So if you haven't seen it, I absolutely recommend it. And your mayor at that time, in 1933, after the flood, he said, he studied Confucius, and he said, a civilization is built on its arts. I'm going to do that. And those young people, and they were almost all young, here on the stage last night, from so many musical and cultural cultural traditions, and ethnic traditions, and racial traditions, they were playing together in the most beautiful, beautiful way. And every one of them were from faith traditions. So my answer very simply is for Louisville to continue to support those arts. And something beautiful will be born out of it. And don't let Teddy Abrams go anywhere.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I think we've actually reached the end of our time here today. And so we can't take any more questions. So let me just thank these amazing panelists for their profound insights today. Thank you. Yeah.